Danny Masterson, who's the actor from That 70s Show, has been sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. Just a shockingly long prison sentence. He's 47 years old. 30 years plus 47 is not quite life in prison, but it's pretty close. You're 77 when you get out of there. You're starting to get up there when you're at 77. So I read the allegations against him, and some people are saying they don't even believe the allegations. I basically believe the women, or at least I don't see much reason not to believe the women broadly. There are some discrepancies, I think, between what they alleged happened and what they are said to have alleged happened back when it happened. And that's the real point here. These crimes are alleged to have happened over 20 years ago, between 2001 and 2003. And so even if you, like me, give these women the benefit of the doubt, you don't think that they're intentionally lying, you assume that virtually everyone in Hollywood is a complete degenerate, so you assume that maybe Danny Masterson did get up to this stuff in his past. If you're going to be all the way on the side of the accusers here, even still, you, probably like me, have a sense that this is not just, that there's something unjust about this sentence to Danny Masterson in the year of our Lord 2023 for 30 years in prison for crimes that were alleged to have happened over 20 years ago. Why? Because we just feel that if a crime is committed against you, you should bring charges in a timely manner. That's why we have things like statutes of limitations. But in this case, there's no more statute of limitations. Why is that? Well, because earlier this year, in January of 2023, LA got rid of the statute of limitations on rape. And LA did that because of the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement and the facade of girl power that the sexual predators who run Los Angeles are going to permit to exist for a little bit of time before they go back to just committing all of the same crimes that they've been committing for decades, for like a century now. That's what this is about. And statutes of limitations are good. What the Me Too Time's Up people will say is statutes of limitations are awful because they silence the survivors of sexual assault. Statutes of limitations protect the rights of everybody. The reason we have them is because 20 years later, evidence is going to be lost. Evidence is going to be suspect. Memories are going to be foggy. I could sincerely believe that something happened 20 years ago. And sometimes I do. I'll say, I know that this happened 20 years ago. And then a friend of mine with whom I had shared that experience will say, oh no, Michael, you're just misremembering that. I mean, that could happen for something that happened 5 or 10 years ago. People's memories are not reliable, especially over that long period of time. So that's the first issue, is the statute of limitations thing. Because they just got rid of it, it just seems unjust. Even if Danny Masterson did precisely or even approximately what they're accusing him of doing. It's just something seems wrong about that system. Right now, go to Genucel.com/Knowles. As you might know, we were all big fans of our friends over at Genucel. In part because of that founder, who's a Coptic Christian from Egypt who fled for the American dream, and largely just for how great the product is. Don't take my word for it. Ella from Rockford says, quote, I have both age and acne spots, and this stuff is actually fading both of them. This serum is worth every penny. Ella is raving about the famous dark spot corrector from Genucel, a must-have after months of record heat and humidity. Sunspots, brown spots, discoloration, even red inflamed patches all disappear in front of your very eyes. And here's the Genucel amazing guarantee. You will see results on day one or your money back. So take advantage of Genucel's most popular package, which now includes the dark spot corrector plus the classic Genucel eyes and puffiness treatment and immediate effects. All about 70% off so that you can try the best skincare in the world for yourself completely risk-free. It is very simple. Genucel.com/Knowles. Start looking years, even decades younger tomorrow. Say goodbye to dark and liver spots, bags and puffiness under the eyes, and crow's feet at Genucel.com/Knowles. That is Genucel.com/Knowles. The second thing that this is about is Scientology. And one of the reasons I believe the women, or am inclined to believe the women, is they did bring up this issue. They did bring up the crimes that allegedly happened to them at the time, but they often didn't bring them up to law enforcement, or they didn't bring them up directly to law enforcement. They first brought them up to Scientology because they're all Scientologists. So they're part of this cult. And in this cult, they say, don't ever go to the police about anything. Just come to us, which is typical of cults. And so these women went to the Scientology ethics officers and they said, hey, this guy raped me, or at the very least took advantage of me or assaulted me or something in between. And the ethics officer said, yeah, well, he's big and famous and important, so keep your mouth shut. And then they did. In some cases, the women kept dating Masterson. They kept showing up to his house. So that is not to say that he didn't commit some egregious act against them, or that he didn't even commit a crime against them. But it is to say, you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes, I guess. If you decide to put your justice, your experience of justice, into the hands of ethics officers in a cult, well, things probably aren't going to work out in a very just way. If you continue to date someone after you allege that they commit a terrible crime against you, people are going to raise an eyebrow or maybe be a little bit skeptical of your claims, especially if those claims come out decades later. And what is this really about? It's not even just about Scientology, it's about Hollywood. This is how Hollywood operates. Talked about this earlier in the week. Hollywood, as a particularly egregious example of the whole liberal establishment, operates in a way that is kind of outside the law, certainly outside the moral law, often outside of the civil law, where you will be encouraged to engage in really depraved, degrading things, especially weird sex stuff. And then it just kind of goes away for a while until it doesn't, until it's convenient, until you're no longer useful to them, or until it's convenient to throw you under the bus as an offering to the wolves. And that's what they'll do to you. Nobody comes out of this looking particularly good. I think that's generally true of Hollywood, and it's generally true of our liberal culture. But the problem here is not going to be resolved just by throwing Danny Masterson in prison. The problem is going to be resolved by working and correcting the entire structures of justice, which have a cultural component in the behavior and norms of Hollywood, which have a political component in the way that our justice system works, which is quite unjust these days. And it ultimately has a theological component in the toleration of weirdo cults like this that victimize women, according to many, many reports. This is what is inescapable. And it's a problem that affects our entire political order. All politics ultimately comes down to religion. Cardinal Manning put this well. He said, all human conflict ultimately is theological. There never has been and never can be a state that is divorced from religion and theological matters, because politics is about how we all live together. It has to do with laws, and ultimately laws come down to the moral law, and ultimately it comes down to the question of the author of the moral law. Politics has to do with people. It comes down to the question of anthropology, and it comes down to the question of who is man, in whose image are we made. It has to do with, ultimately, God, because God is the author and sustainer of all things. And as long as we keep putting off the question and we say, oh, God has nothing to do with society, we're going to totally divorce church from state, morality is just socially constructed, whatever, then weirdo cults are going to continue to prey on people, and tyrannical political leaders are going to continue to flout the moral law, and people are going to continue to act in a way that's very, very bad. Boy, what a great clip that was. Now, hold on. You got to ring that bell. Subscribe to the Michael Knowles Show podcast. See you next time.